and welcome back to Herpodcast. I am so glad you are here once again, and I am here with my very special guest, Pastor Emma Mullings. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
I was just mentioning to you that you are one of my favorite people, and I thought of you instantly for this podcast because you are one of the most real and open people that I know. So I'm excited to get into this topic.
I apologize in advance.
And I am excited because today we're going to be speaking about marriage, and Terrence is not here. So he's probably going to make lots of jokes at his expense, which you'll see later.
Unfortunately, I actually do it in front of him as well, but that's fine. He can handle it. He's resilient.
Well, that's good. That's our first example of a good marriage. It's just open all around. But anyway, today we're going to be speaking about marriage. For those of you just tuning in, you may not know that this podcast is designed, or my purpose behind this podcast is for the girl, for the young lady who we can look back at and kind of pull up with us. They're things that I wish I knew, or I wish I listened to, really, because some of these things we know, but we don't necessarily listen to in our early 20s, in our mid 20s, especially when we're picking a mate. You know, sometimes there are things that our mom told us or things that our dad told us, but we don't really want to listen to those things. But you and Terrence have one of the most amazing, most kingdom effective marriages that I've ever seen. But you guys are also so real and so honest about what it takes to get there. So can you tell us a little bit about your first year of marriage? This is one of the first things I learned about you because I met Emma and we got to talking, and she was like, this was before I ever had a podcast or anything. I met Emma, we got to talking, and she was like, yeah, we have a podcast. And it was so funny because I had only met you once, but then I knew everything about your whole life from your podcast and your first year of marriage. So tell us a little bit about how that went.
So our first year of marriage was horrific. It's wonderful now.
Wow.
We've been married 13 years.
Mm-hmm.
It's wonderful now.
4 beautiful children,
4 kids.
A ministry,
Yes.
church plan.
Yes. But the first year was really, really bad. I threw a vase at his head once. Let me just give you some highlights. It missed.
He's alive today.
He's alive today. I don't recommend it. But we were just two very different people who didn't really realize we were extremely different, but we had to learn to celebrate the difference.
Wow.
We spent, and he will say this too, so I'm not throwing him under the bus right now, but he will say he tried to make me like him. And I just would get really angry, and but he says that as well. And so we had to learn to celebrate the difference. Like, God made us different for a reason. And we had to learn to really celebrate the difference. But there were so many things that irritated us about each other. The love languages. Do you know what they are? Have you talked about them?
I do, but tell us a little bit about
So I didn't even understand these. I hadn't even heard of them until someone gave me the book, I think when we were engaged or whatever, and I'm like, yeah, whatever. But so we all have this love tank on the inside of us, like a big tank that makes us feel loved, and it's, full or half empty, or it's empty, or it's got leaks everywhere. That's probably another podcast. But there's 5 things that really fill our love tank. So there's acts of service, like when someone does something for you. There's gifts, quality time, physical touch, and words of affirmation. So often we are giving the other person love in a particular love language, but that's not the language that they receive love in. So it's like you're speaking Spanish to someone and they only speak English. Yeah. And so you're giving a whole lot, but they don't receive it that way. So I would give love in gifts. And Terrence, like, his love language is words of affirmation. He just needs me to tell him that he's awesome. And that's all he needs. And we had so many, and at that time, my love language has changed. It's evolved. Now it's acts of service. Like, I've got 4 kids, please help me.
I was going to say, I think that happens with the children.
Yes.
Because my love language was gifts also. And then now I'm like, don't give me anything. Just give me a nap. That's the gift that I want. The gift.
Exactly. But we had so many fights in that first year. I remember, let me just give you an example. Kind of 2 quick examples. So my love language is gifts. So it's my birthday. We've been married like 2 months. We got married like 2 months before my birthday. And birthdays are a big thing. And, we grew up in Australia, me and my family, like very low income family, but birthdays were always a big thing. Like we didn't even have to go to school if we didn't, it was a thing. You always had a cake. You always had like a little party. And it was my birthday, and we had like a church like leaders meeting that night. And he said, I was like waiting to see if there were any plans. Like I'm thinking that he's going to do something. And so when he said we were going to that as planned, I thought it was a cover for
a surprise party.
Yes, of course. Surprise party. So in the morning we get up and we, both had jobs. And so I was waiting for like a present or like breakfast in bed. And there was nothing. And I'm like, it's okay. Maybe he's going to, I'm like, bye. Like he said happy birthday, but there's nothing. Like there was nothing, not a card, nothing. Went to work. I'm thinking he's going to do something, like he's going to show up for lunch. No, nothing. Get home thinking that this is a surprise. It wasn't. Like it was just nothing. I got so mad.
This is my worst nightmare.
I was like, are you serious? Like, is this a joke? Like, where's the camera? Like, it's my birthday. Anyway, I'd gotten really frustrated with him during the day, but I think I was saying, I had sent him a couple of messages like, hey, so is there something, I was just wanting to, is there something happening tonight? Like, I started to think, okay, I don't think anything's happening. Anyway, the church meeting there was no plan. That was the plan. But he came home and he'd gotten me, it was very obvious that he'd gotten it from a gas station. He'd gotten me a card, right? Inside the card was a $20. Now, in Australia, it's a hardware store. It's called Bunnings. It's a hardware store. So, it's like, I don't know what the equivalent here would be. But
like
it was...
Home Depot?
Home Depot. Exactly the same thing. So, yeah. It was like a $20 Home Depot. You know the voucher that you get from the gas station? Yeah. That was it.
Do you like building things?
No. Do you know what he said? He said... I remember you said you really like your mum's gardens. And I'm like, yeah, I like her gardens. What am I meant to buy plants? Like, I don't know. I
don't want to buy anything at home.
Like, what in the world? I was so mad. And then on Valentine's Day, because at that time I received, like my love tank was filled by receiving gifts, but I also gave in gifts. I actually still do give in gifts. Everyone gets a present. But it was Valentine's Day. He likes to sleep in. I got up early. I went up to the cafe up the road, got his favorite coffee breakfast. I got them to make his favorite breakfast, and I brought it home and put it on a plate as if I'd cooked it. But I got also, next to the cafe was a florist, and it's Valentine's Day, so roses, flowers, they're all triple the price. But I got them to like wrap it in, like I said, it's for a guy, don't make it too pretty. But I came back, I got him in bed, coffee, breakfast in bed, the flower, the roses. I'm like, happy Valentine's Day. And he was like shocked, and I knew, like, I realized straight away he has not done anything, and he's like freaking out right now. And then he goes to me while I'm still holding the roses. Oh, babe, like guys don't really do flowers. Oh. I'm like, but we had, like, that's just the topic of how we were giving and receiving love. We were just on so many different pages with so many things. And we had lots of talks about that. We ended up in counseling our first year of marriage for over a year, which was the best thing that we ever did, because we had to figure a whole lot of stuff out. He did learn very quickly, like, if that's not your love language, you don't need to tell them while they're actually while they've been holding the present, like, talk to them about it later. Like, unnecessary with the timing. But we had so many things, like, even family. So his family, Sydney's a super multicultural city, right? There's people from all different cultures. It's just our normal. And I'd never, and this was me being, unaware, because I'd only met his parents, I think, twice before we got married. They didn't live in Sydney. I didn't realize, and he actually didn't realize either, they're first generation, and they would say they're Jamaicans living in Australia. Like, they would not say they're Australian.
Yeah. That's like my parents. They were Dominicans living here.
Yes.
They're not Americans.
So there were Jamaican cultural things that were expected that I had no idea about. And actually, in his defense, he didn't know either. So he was kind of figuring it out at the same time.
He couldn't even teach you them because
I was
he
mad at him. I'm like, why didn't you tell me this? He's like, I don't know what's going on either. I'm trying to figure this out too, like, because he was born in Australia. So, so there were a lot of clashes, just different things, different expectations. Family would just kind of show up and they'd be staying for 3 weeks. But we had a little 2-bedroom apartment and we had a baby super quick, like we'd been married 3 months and had a beautiful surprise pregnancy. So there was like a whole heap of things, like just outside pressures, expectations. And we fought. We would have really big fights all the time. It was down to the tiniest little things, like how I did the dishes. We didn't have a dishwasher. How I did the dishes, because he's very fussy. He's very particular.
About the dishes.
Yeah, because I would leave soap suds on the dishes. I also use a microwave. He doesn't believe in microwaves. He thinks that's why we have so much cancer, because people use microwaves. He's not here to defend himself. So there were a whole heap of things, like we're just very different, and we would fight all the time. But the thing that we had to learn how to do is repair. We would fight, but we wouldn't do repair well. And what we learned in counseling is that it's okay to have these clashes and these, we did learn how to make them not fights, but, heated discussions. Don't throw any vases, Emma. But we learned how to do repair well, because people are different. You can have different thoughts and views and, have good conversations, robust conversations, shall we call them? But as long as you do repair well, it's actually all about the repair. It's not even about the challenges. It's about how well you do repair. So we had to learn how to do repair well. And that's what actually made us stronger. And we learned a whole heap about communication, even just little things like in the moment, say we had a rule of engagement. We would write these down. These are our rules of engagement. We both signed it and agreed to it. This is some of the stuff the counsellor helped us with in that first year. So if things were getting heated, and one of us, we would use the term flooding. Like, how when it's just too much, I'm overwhelmed. I know that if we keep talking right now, I'm going to make it worse. Yeah. So we would use the term flooding. So we'd be like, okay, we were allowed to say, I'm flooding. Normally it's him that would flood, because I'd be like, we need to get a resolve about this.
So I'm flooding is like, I'm getting overwhelmed.
Yeah, I'm getting overwhelmed.
It's becoming too much for me.
I can't continue this conversation.
And then you were able to pause it at that point?
So if one of us says we're flooding, the agreement is we make a time to talk about this at a later date. It needs to have a plan. You can't just be like, too much, I'm not going to talk about it, because then nothing ever gets resolved. Yeah. But we make a time. Like, I would love to talk to you about this tomorrow at 4:00. So then the other person knows, okay, there is a plan in place. So they're not like constantly trying to, which then becomes nagging. It's like, okay, we're going to talk about this tomorrow at dinner. There's a plan in place to actually, in a calm environment, to have a discussion.
So the talker knows, I can be secure because I'm going to have a place to get my feelings out. Yes. But the other person has time to process.
Yes. So we had on a 1-pager, a list of rules of engagement. That was a big one. Because I would want to talk about things now, and he needed to, he needed to have it. There's times when he can process things, but like if it's late at night, he just needs to decompress from the day and like wind down. We're not going to get anywhere. But he would always give me a time. Okay, we're going to talk about this at this time. And he would follow through. Really, he would always follow through, which the counsellor, which was another thing on the rules of engagement. Always follow through when you said you would talk about it, because then you both know there's a plan in place and you trust their word. We're going to talk about it at this time. And honestly, when we would do that, by then we're both calmer. We've both had time to think things through, and it's a productive conversation. Nothing's in the heat of the moment. So
100%. I love that. And I love that all of this is coming out, and thank you for being so transparent, because one of my main things when I thought of you for this episode of the podcast was I feel like so many people have this view of marriage that if you married the right person, you're not going to fight. When that's impossible. It is impossible to marry any person unless you marry yourself somehow. You clone yourself and marry yourself. it's impossible to marry another person. And because we usually are attracted to people who are different from us.
Yeah.
And the same things that attract us to them in our dating season. And so I love what you said when you were like, we didn't know we had so many differences, because you're not aware that you're being attracted by those differences in your dating season. And then you get married and those same differences cause friction. But what I would love to tell, the girl behind me, what I would love to tell the young woman who just got married, who's 21, 22, or whatever age, is that just because you're fighting, it doesn't mean that your relationship is toxic necessarily.
Yes.
Obviously, there are instances where it might be, and counseling is an excellent tool for that. But also, counseling is not a last resort. You can choose
not at all.
to go into counseling.
Yes.
And so
I'm all about counseling, because they taught us how to communicate. Like, back then we would fight. I would use the word fight. Now, I wouldn't even use that word. We don't fight at all. But we have some robust conversations.
You get passionate, but you're communicating
because
something.
We've learnt to let them finish their thought, not to cut them off. Like, we've learnt different things. Like, I don't say, you do this, you do that. I say, when you do this, it makes me feel like this. We've just learned how to communicate well. So now, after 13 years, we have some robust conversations, but I wouldn't even use the word fight. But we learn all of these things in counseling. I'm all for counseling. I think everybody needs to go to counseling. And if you don't think you need to go to counseling, that's
you
your
probably
problem.
need it the most. Yeah. I always say the same thing. But for either of you, because you guys were serving the Lord when you were married, correct? I know that you guys met, and I believe you weren't.
I was far, far away.
That laugh was like a Pee Wee Herman laugh. But anyway, so but I think that's another thing that I'd like to ask you. Was it difficult for either one of you guys to make that decision? Like, okay, so we're going to go into counseling? Because I feel like people of faith, it's even harder for them, because they're like, what counseling do we need? We have the Bible. And it's like, yeah, the Bible is amazing. And if you get a biblically, based counselor, amazing. That's wonderful. But it's not, sometimes you do need to go that extra step. So what would you say to somebody who's struggling with that decision? Like, but what are people going to say? Or do I really need counseling? What if I just pray harder?
Listen, everyone needs counseling. You don't know what you don't know. 100%. Like, you just don't know what you don't know. And they will give you practical tools to be able to learn to communicate well. Also, if you go as a couple, which you should, it helps to have just that third party in the room. Sometimes they act more as a mediator, but they're like, okay, now let them talk. Okay, now how do you feel when they say that? Like, it will help you so much. So I basically, without telling you my whole story, because we'll be here for another hour and a half. So I came back into a relationship with God at 22 years old. Highly dysfunctional person. Had been out of church since I'm a pastor's kid, but I left church as soon as I could because I did not want anything to do with church. I would say I hated church. Don't worry, the good Lord knows all about it. He's fine. We've resolved it. I was very angry, highly dysfunctional, had been through a whole lot, had done a whole lot of stuff. And I started, as basically 3 months after giving my life to Jesus, I started regular counseling every single week. And I went on a journey of healing, because you get delivered in that moment of salvation, but you don't freedom is a journey. Yes. It's like a workout. It's like lunges. And so many people, they're delivered, but they're not free. And you can die delivered and not free. 100%. And so I had to push into that healing journey. And it's a process. The Bible talks about the renewing of your mind. It's a process. But I was all in for the process. So I had seen how regular counseling had helped me so much in my own journey. So I think I didn't have any thoughts about counseling. I was just like, everybody should do it. And so Terrence he was willing. It wasn't his first thought, but he was totally willing to come along for the journey. And I think he saw the fruit straight away. He saw progress straight away. And then he actually, and he'll say this himself, he then went to counseling himself, because he would get really angry. And he's spoken about this many times. He would just get really angry and he couldn't control his anger. So he chose himself to go to counseling and just like, where is this coming from? and he worked on himself as well. So we were both doing that separately and then both coming to counseling together. And that's actually what created such a strong foundation for our marriage, because we were able to learn about ourselves individually, and it just made us better people. So
that's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I love that you say that, because I my favorite part of everything you just said was freedom is a journey. It's like lunges. You're working it out.
Yes.
And I think if there's any message that the Lord has given me for this season of my life, it's been that, because I was the girl who grew up in church thinking church is going to resolve everything. And to a specific to an extent it does, because a relationship with the Holy Spirit and a relationship with the Lord can do so much, but you don't know what you don't know.
You don't know what you
and
don't
so
know.
it wasn't the Lord that was lacking, and I think that's where my misunderstanding was. It was like, but Jesus is enough. He is enough, but do you know enough about Jesus to take yourself along this journey by yourself, or would you like someone to help you?
Yeah.
And that was where it kind of clicked, where I was like, wait, somebody can help me. They're not replacing Jesus.
No.
They are leading me
Yes.
to greater emotional health. And I think that that's something that I think the church is changing in that regard.
Yeah.
But it would help us so much just as people, and as well in our marriages, because like you said, you don't know what you don't know. What would you say is, like, you said so many good things already. So you learned about the love languages. You learned about, I love the setting a date when you're flooding. Just set another time.
Yes.
What is another practical thing that you would maybe say this was like the turning point, or like this was maybe, or maybe there was no turning point, because I'm sure it was a process, but when you said when this clicked, things got better, because you said the first year was tough.
Yeah.
So here you are, you're newly married, you had recently come back to Christ, you had a little baby very early on. So where was it that you said, okay, when we got this down, we began to see changes? Was there anything like that?
I think our communication, and there are a few elements in that, and I touched on it just before, but something that I would do a lot is I would say, and you don't care about me because you do this and you do this. And so we would never deal with the issue, because all he's offended. He's like, of course I care about you. I love you. So it's almost like we create like a side issue and we have this argument over this. But I learned to change my language. So like, when you do this, it makes me feel like you don't care. Or it makes me feel not valued when you do this. And so I learned to change.
Then you're not attacking the person.
Yes.
You're attacking the action.
Yes. So it's me and him. It's not me against him. It's now me and him together. And this is the issue here. So we're going to work together to resolve this issue. So I think when we learn to communicate, and we still think differently to this day, but we know how to communicate it well. I think that was... And it's, you have to train yourself. Like, that's what the counseling really helped with. You have to train yourself. And we had to create a safe place where it was like, hey, remember how we had like rules of engagement. Remember how the counselor said this? Well,
you're not doing it.
Do that. But we don't say it in the moment. We let everything come. And then when it's, when you're cuddling up, watching Netflix or whatever, hey, remember? But they'll receive it. They should. If they don't, you can text Pastor Vanessa. But because it's a calm environment, and they're like,
And was there anything that you felt like, because, we'll leave Pastor Terrence alone a little bit right now. But no, was there anything that you felt like, this is what I had to change in order for my marriage to succeed, or for my marriage to get better? And I don't want to go too deep into your secret emotional space, but like,
I don't have many secrets.
I know, and that's what I love about you. But the reason why I asked that is because I think that so much marriage advice, or so much, maybe not advice, but so much of what we ask sometimes is, how can I get my partner to do this?
Yeah.
But what you just said is I had to train.
Yes.
Yeah, we have to change things about ourselves if we're ever going to see changes in our marriage. So was there anything like that for you where you were like, wait a second? I mean, you were already going to counseling.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head there. I had to, instead of putting all my energy and trying to change him and fix him, I had to just pull back and just work on me. And I had to really I was seeing our marriage initially as like a sprint, like it has to be fixed now. Like, but I had to see our marriage as a marathon. Like, we are in this for life, and we are committed for life. So I may not fix everything overnight, but I'm committed for life. So I'm going to work on me and work on being the best version of myself and healing the parts of me that I need to heal and learning how to communicate the best that I can communicate. And that started to change things for me. So, yeah.
That's amazing. And so how much strain does it add? Or let me ask, instead of asking how much strain does it add, let me ask, do you guys have rules of engagement when it comes to ministry as well? Because another aspect of this, on top of, and that's why I love you guys, because on top of, you know, coming from different backgrounds, coming from different cultures, you guys have 4 kids, and you guys work together.
Yes, we work together.
Which I also work with my husband, so I know what I'm asking.
Yeah.
So what's that like?
Okay. So we have had to relearn some things since moving to America to plant a church. Because we've worked together before. We produced a TV show together, just different projects, but not in a everyday, in the grind, planting a church, 24/7. So, and Terrence he is a leader. He is type A. He's, you know, he's got a sweet spirit, but he's assertive. Like, he'll tell you.
Yeah. He'll tell you what he wants.
And he also is very creative. He's quite a unique mix of a person. So he's a visionary. So he's got lots of ideas and this and that. And we do balance each other out beautifully. Like, I'll bring it all in. Okay, let's focus over here. Let's do a list.
You said you wanted to do these things,
yes,
so let's do these
focus.
things.
Let's do a spreadsheet. Let's do a to-do list. But yeah, we've definitely had to figure out, and because I was getting really frustrated, to be honest. I was getting really frustrated. So what we had to do is we had to sit down with pen and paper. We do things old school, the pen and paper, and we had to say, okay, what's your lane? What's my lane? Let's get it really clear, because right now we're both doing everything, and it's getting a little bit messy. So this is what you're going to lead, and it doesn't mean that I'm not part of it, because we're still doing most things
but
together.
You're making the decisions.
Yes. So you're leading this area, I'm leading this area, you're leading this area, I'm leading this. We just had to work out our lanes.
Yeah.
And once it was clearer, it just brought some order. So we're both still very much doing everything, but there's order in what we're doing. So, for example, the worship team. I run our worship team. He plays every instrument. He's a phenomenally gifted musician and songwriter. We both write songs. Oh boy, we both write songs. We've had arguments whilst writing songs. Anyway, he's very involved, you know, with the worship team. But he's like, he'll then now default to me. Okay, you're leading the worship team. Like Sunday, we do monthly pop-up services right now. Sunday, we're doing Build Your Church. I've got the choir, I've got everything going. I was like so excited. He hadn't even heard, I don't know how he didn't hear this song. Like, are you under a rock? He hadn't heard this song before rehearsal Sunday. He's like, what's this song? I don't know about that song. I'm like, you haven't heard it. You don't know it. And then we did it. He's like, oh, actually, that was really good. Yeah. But he's learned. I think maybe a year ago, he would have said, oh, I don't know what that song is. Like, no, we need to do something else. Yeah, take it out. I don't know what that is. But now he's like he trusts me with he knows what my lanes are, and he trusts me to lead those. And
yeah, so what I'm hearing is trust and boundaries.
Yes. See, you articulated it perfectly.
I love it because I think that is so important, because it's like, okay, we're working together, but I love that you said you put order. Yeah. We're not just, and I think a lot of, especially ministry couples or even small business or whatever, they don't have that. So it's like you said, it's like every day's a boardroom meeting, you know. Yes. We're just gonna get together and it's like, well, I don't like that. Well, I do. Well, I want to sing Build My Church. Well, I don't want to sing Build My Church. When you can say, this is where you lead, this is where you're gonna make the decisions, this is where I'm gonna allow you to go ahead and lead, I can see how that would make it so much easier. And my husband and I, we do a similar thing. So like, for example, when it comes to, we're both executive pastors here at Segadores, but when it comes to the youth, he has the final say.
Yes.
And that was even a big thing for us, communicating it to our team, because a large part of the team that's on staff, I'm their staff leader. Yeah. I'm like, when it's not ministry, when it's work, I'm their boss. So a lot of times it was very natural to them to come to me for answers, and it was natural for me to answer when I had to learn to reprogram. And so I guess I'm a little bit more like Terrence, where I stick my hands in everything, and I had to learn to reprogram and say, that's not my area. You have to ask Rico. Yeah. Oh, well, Rico's going to take longer because, my husband's a processor. So he always takes longer to answer. I come up with every answer in the moment. They're not always the right answers.
Terrence takes a long time to answer too. So people will ask him things, they don't get an answer, so then they ask me.
And that's what would happen. And I think that created so much strain working together. Like the first couple of years of doing actual ministry together were so hard because of that. But it's like you said, I had to train myself not to answer. It's like, like in the courts when they say you have to use judicial restraint. Like when actual judges say, you know what, I'm actually not going to talk about that because that's not what I'm here to do. I had to learn to do that. Yeah. And once I learned to do that, once that clicked, once I said, you know what? And so much of that had to do with me addressing my own issues. Yes. Like now that I'm processing out loud, so much of that had to do with me saying, you know what? I have an obsession with getting things done, and I have an obsession with speed. I really do. I'm working on it. I'm dealing with it. So when people ask me a question, I was not acting out of conviction. I was acting out of compulsion. Yeah. I had a compulsive need to fix things in the instant they were brought to me. Yes. And working on myself and myself going to counseling and myself learning and becoming self-aware, which is something I talk about so much on this podcast, I was able to say, you know what? I don't need to answer that. Like, I no longer feel a compulsive, addictive need to answer you. Yeah. I have the power to say, wait for Rico. Yeah. Yeah. I think that will help me one day when my children are teenagers. Yes. I hope. We're not there yet. You're not. Are you almost there? How old is it?
Hosanna, our oldest, just turned 12.
Oh, okay, so you're old.
But our youngest just turned 3. So they're very spread out.
Years of
we have years to go. Practice. We have years to go. I think on that topic, just to add as well, and we did touch on it, but I think also trusting is trust. You got to trust them to lead that area. Like, I trust T in his decisions. So it's not me like, oh, what are you doing? Like, that's he's leading that area. I trust him. He's got it. He's good.
Is it difficult for you to see someone fail forward? Because that's tough for me. Like, when I don't agree with your decision, I don't think it's gonna go well. It's very hard for me to sit back and just let you do it. But that's also something that I've had to learn.
I think I've gotten better at that, and part of that is I just don't have time to be thinking about all this stuff. So
I'm just gonna let you do what you do.
I just gotta let go. So
100%. I agree.
And may the Lord be with you.
So what would you tell, right? Like, and that's helped me too, being like at the end of the day, and that's the honor and the privilege that we have specifically working in ministry, that I'm like, at the end of the day, the Lord's called him. Yeah. And I think this way about my dad too, because even my dad sometimes, like, it's crazy because, he's my dad, he's older than me, but still sometimes I'm like, I don't know if I would make that decision. Yeah. And I kind of try to get him to change it. And I've learned, again, conviction over compulsion, because I realized that some of those things I thought were conviction. I'd go to my dad and I'd say, no, I just really believe biblically, blah, 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 blah. And when I really got to know myself, I said, you know what? I'm disguising it as conviction, but really I just want him to agree with me. Really, it's my opinion. I found a Bible verse to back it up. And
we can find a Bible verse to back anything up that we want to find.
Anything. And I'm like, when I realized that, and it's something so confrontative to hear about yourself and like to know about yourself. But when I realized that, there was also freedom in it. Yes. Because I was like, at the end of the day, he's called by God. My husband is called by God. They have their gifts, giftings that God didn't give me. And that's why they see things that I don't see. Yes. So I have to let them do that. And when I let them do that and I let go, then I'm also free, because it's no longer my responsibility either. Yeah. And I saw something the other day. It was a meme on the internet. But, sometimes the internet is good. It's not all bad. Because I loved it so much. It said, if it's out of your hands, then put it out of your mind. So there were so many things that were out of my hands. And I think this is applicable even to to marriage still, because there are so many things that we trust our partner with, but then we still want to be worrying about it and fussing about it and nagging about it, where it's like, if I put it in my husband, I either have to let him succeed or let him fail.
Yeah.
But it needs to be him, because I think if not, we do create these toxic kind of dynamics where it's like, I asked you to do something, but then before you did it, I went ahead and tried to do it for you. And I think a lot of women are like that, or if it's just me, I'm sorry.
No, totally.
And that happened to me a lot with the kids at the beginning. You know, it's like, take care of the baby, but put him to sleep the way that I want, and wake him up the way that I want, and do everything the way that I want. When finally I had to be like, you know what? When he's with the kids,
they're alive.
They're alive. It's going to happen. So trust and boundaries.
Yeah.
Trust and boundaries. What would you say? I'm just here picking your brain. I think I'm asking more questions than the normal podcast.
That's what I'm here for.
I love it. I love just getting your perspective on things. What would you say to somebody, because you and Terrence are different, and then a question that I get a lot from my youth ministry is like, what should I be looking for in a future mate? And I think that some people will tell you, like, find someone, you know, there's just so many opinions on that. But like, what have you learned now, 13 years later, being able to look back?
So do you know what? There's two things that I think of. I have always thought, obviously, a man after God's own heart. I think that would be a given.
Yeah.
That would be a given. But I've always thought number one for me and number one for people should be someone that is a learner. Someone that wants to grow. Like, because if you are a learner and you want to grow, like, within yourself, and they're a man after God's own heart, then that's a safe place. Because God gave us free will, remember? So they don't have to listen to God. Like, we have free will. So you need a man after God's own heart, but who wants to grow, who I would use the word is a learner. Like Terrence, it was from when I first met him, he's a learner. Like, he wants to grow. He's always hungry after the things of God. He gives God full access to his world. So that felt like a safe place. Because there are Christian men who are like, I'm a Christian and I talk to God, but I ain't listening to what he's saying. Like, he can't touch this area. So it's like, you're never actually going to grow in that area. But I also think something that I see people do a lot, they look at people who have been married for 20 years. And they're looking for a man like that.
Yeah.
And it's like, listen, when that woman married that man, he was not who he is today. No. You should have seen him back then.
Iron has been sharpening iron for 20 good years.
Yes. So they're looking for that. But that guy, if they only saw what that guy was like 20 years ago, you know, so I think, but at the same time, you can't marry someone for their potential. So, you know, you can't marry someone thinking, but they've got all this, you know, potential. Like, you have to think, if nothing changed, if they didn't change, could I be married to this person? I think you do need to ask yourself that question. Like, if nothing changed, because otherwise you're marrying a project. Like, this is a renovation for you. So
it's all about that balance, right? Like, I could be happy with this person the way they are, but they're also showing me signs that they're going to grow and become a better version of themselves.
Yes. And as you are as well. Like, you need to be growing and working on yourself.
100%.
Yeah, so I think those two things. I think, honestly, like, I've seen so many great girls. This is a podcast for females. So great girls marry men who do not have a relationship with Jesus, but they're good guys. But honestly, it happens time and time again. 5 years down the track, they're not in a church community. Their kids are not in a church community. So number one has to be someone after God's own heart, like hungry for the things of God. Not just like, I'll come to church, sing a few songs, whatever. Someone hungry after the things of God. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think if we were realistic about the change that occurs between the dating and marriage, there's just so much less friction in dating. Because why wouldn't there be?
Yeah.
You know, like, you're not paying bills together. I mean, obviously it's different if you're living together, you're paying bills. That's a different kind of dating. That's, you know, marriage adjacent, I guess you would say. But most of the young people that I know and in church, they're going from basically hanging out, because that's what dating is, and obviously you're getting to know each other and there's feelings involved, but then you're going to having so many things that you share, and then you throw kids in there, and you're forming an entire human character with no rule book. I mean, because there's the Bible, but even the whole Bible is not only about child rearing, you know, like there's no manual, and you have these little people that come with their own, and so all of that creates so much friction. And I think if we were realistic about the fact that yes, this guy that you're dating might be fine right now in your dating relationship, and it might be okay for you for him to come to church and sing a few worship songs like you said, but you're gonna want a man who can do more than that when the friction turns on. When the heat's turned up, you're gonna want, and I think that is so important. And I think that I've seen it both ways. Girls that don't give enough importance to that relationship, excuse me, getting a little cold, but girls that don't give enough importance to the relationship with God, and they look at all the other things, the financial factor, the, you know, how educated he is, how well spoken he is, how good looking he is, and that doesn't work out. And then I've seen it the other way around as well, where not that they give too much importance to that, but they look at that and they don't look at the other side. Like you said, they're marrying a project because they're like, man, this guy loves God so much, but he has a terrible credit score and he's in a whole bunch of debt and he whatever. So it's like, I think God is, you know, God will give you the wisdom to make that balance. You know, but it is so important to look at it sober-mindedly. And I think that's where her podcast comes from, where people who are married and, you know, people like you who have so much experience can look back and be like, okay, but consider this. Consider a few other factors. That you might not be thinking about. So thank you so much for being with us.
You're welcome.
Thank you for being open and honest. And I think maybe next time I'll invite you back with Terrence so we can have a good laugh.
He
I'm
would
sure
love to.
He would.
And you know he won't hold back on his thoughts and advice.
No, he won't. But we love you guys. And if you guys are able, please check out Emma and Terrence's podcast. You want to tell everybody what it's called, where they can find it?
It's called the Terrence and Emma Podcast, and it's all about relationships and seeing things differently. And yeah, we have some guests in, some psychologists, marriage counselor, family therapists. So don't worry, you're not just getting all your advice from us. There's people that actually know things. So yeah, it'll help you.
Thank you so much for taking your time out, and thank you for listening to her podcast. We'll see you next time.